Hello everyone. This is kind of a behind the scenes video today. It's going to be a look at how I'm learning about associated types versus generic types. So if we go to my website, which is here, I've done an article and I've put in the different types, no pun intended. So this is the associated type, which is where you create a trait, and then you've got the type, item, and then wherever you use that, it's always the same type. So if I had two impulse that were both using this trait, the types would be the same. So when a type is tied to a trait, it avoids specifying the generic type in every usage. The flip side of that is it means you have to use the same type in every usage, if that makes sense. So I asked ChatGPT to confirm my understanding, which is what I'm trying to do now. I try not to let ChatGPT spoon feed me, but sometimes it's just good for checking that you've understood something. Get a second opinion. The benefit may come clearer with more functions. So what I did was I added more functions. So as well as the um, get function, I added update. Now you can see, so each of these functions is actually using the same type, which will be whatever the type T is that you pass in. So each of these functions here will be using an I32. Yeah, because it's not specified, so it'll default to I32. But um, that's using the same type here and here. So with generics, you could actually specify um, as you go. So here we're specifying a string, but because this is generic up here, with generics, you could use another version of the trait or another instance of that trait, and you could actually use something other than a string. So with the associated type, the type is tied to the trait. Once you specify it, then that's what you're using throughout. Example, cloud storage with associated types. So here we're calling our type data, and data is actually a vec of U8s. So it doesn't have to be a sort of a primitive type, it can be a vec of something. So when we run it, it compiles, which is what we want. But here you can see, because we've used a type of data, we're stuck now with that vec U8 throughout. So that's how I understand it. I'd be interested what anybody else can comment on this and how they can help explain it, because um, my first encounter with associated types was with iterators. And type item U32 there. So that's, here we can see the iterator trait only requires a method to be defined for the next element and an associated type. So if you're like me, you probably learned about the iterator trait and then you kind of left that to one side, and now I'm kind of coming back to associated types. Partly because I've been looking at a few AI libraries, and I tend to look at them from a point of view of how to use them, but also how it's written and how I would go about writing or adding to that library, modifying it, and so on. So I think it's good to know about associated types. This is just my kind of little intro to them, really. So this ChatGPT did this for me, but I think it's pretty valid. You can store multiple types with generic traits. You define per use. But with associated types, it's fixed per implementation. Simpler for single-use traits. So use generics if the trait should handle multiple types. Use associated types if the type is strongly linked to the implementation. So obviously with the iterator trait, the type is strongly linked to the implementation. So associated types will force a single concrete type for each implementing struct, while generics will allow any number of types. So arguably generics are a bit more flexible, but yeah, if the type is strongly linked, then you should probably think about using an associated type. So they're more concise if fixed per implementation. So up here you can see it's fixed per the implementation because it's just using the type data. So wherever this trait is used, it will be using the same type. That's how I understand it. Again, probably not fair to call this a tutorial. It's more me talking aloud as I'm reading stuff. So if you don't like this format, apologies. But I hope that this has just made you have a think about the pros and cons of associated types versus generics. If you're an advanced programmer, I apologize because this probably is quite obvious and you know this inside out by now. But I just thought it would be useful to anybody who has started learning Rust, who has learned about iterator trait and sort of park the associated type to one side. But you will see it pop up, so I think it's good to know. And yeah, it's not, even if you don't use it when you're writing your own code, it's always good to understand it when you're reading other people's code. And I know when I first started learning Rust, the self with the capital S and the lowercase s, yeah, especially the self with the item, took a little bit of understanding. So yeah, there we go. If you want to practice these examples, just click on the link on the webpage, redandgreen.co.uk. The article will be the most recent as of January 2025. And yeah, there you see. So we could add we could add a set or a new or something there, and it would also use self item because it's using the container trait. Because it's using container trait, it's using the same type throughout. Any comments or tips? Welcome. Please comment, subscribe, and all that. Thanks for watching, and I will be back soon, possibly with some more rig.rs because I think it's very good. Catch you soon.